here we are still dealing with a coup that I believe the CIA ran against Donald Trump from the beginning.
So I would agree with you completely with that, and I think there's a plethora of evidence now, and there's people coming out and saying that the only thing that we're missing is indictments, for treason and sedition. So I mean, hopefully, I'm not all seeing, all knowing. We're not in the government, so hopefully that is something that is actually happening. It's unclear, but you can see how hard it would be. The Justice Department is still replete with members of the senior executive service who are these bureaucrats who are burrowed in there, who are subversive and seditious and undermining President Trump at any turn, undermining everybody who works for him, who is sincere, doing everything they can to disable and to draw this out until the midterms when they think they can steal back the House and the Senate.
Well, we cannot allow that to happen, and there's a lot of division, as you and I both know. We have been in this battle. You've been in it for a very, very long time, but this current post-Trump election 2016 battle is very different because of the advent of influencers and podcasters and all of that. And we have to understand the midterms have nothing to do with Donald Trump at all, because the other side is being funded by Progressive International that just had a big event in Spain celebrating global communism, where Tim Walz spoke and Chris Murphy from Connecticut spoke, and they zoomed in Mamdani and Hillary, and we know Bernie Sanders' wife was one of the creators of that, along with John Podesta, and that is a global international organization. And what they want is European socialism. And when I look at a lot of this, and first of all, the EU is not our ally, okay? People have to really get that straight.
Not anymore.
The EU is a tentacle of the international banking cartel that has captured 27 nations, and their sovereignty is all but gone. And the whole goal, to me, the Third Reich, a lot of people don't know what their actual goal was. It was a unified Europe with no Russia that ran the world essentially out of Brussels and Geneva, using the U.S. might, military, and the city of London as the money with the Vatican. And again, we are seeing a very similar situation going on in Europe right now, and people are too scared to call it what it is, but it is definitely totalitarian. And this group that funds the Democrat Socialists of America, that is pushing those candidates, that has funded this red, green, blue access, they are all a part of that. And that is what people need to understand. These international groups that have circumvented our country, they are at an end game now. And they really, it will not be a win for the Democrats. There is no Democratic Party. It'll be a win for the international progressive DSA, which is funded by them, to actually collapse our nation state as fast as possible. And they are ready. And you know how they're doing it, Lara? They're doing it through mayor's races. They're doing it. They don't care about the president anymore. They are way past that. They don't even care that much about governors. They're trying to capture regions in the United States. And that is what is going on. That's why we have these socialist, DSA or straight up communists running Los Angeles, running Boston, running Chicago, running New York. This was a plan to use the mayor's races. In fact, Rahm Emanuel, when he was the mayor of Chicago, he wrote a book about mayors being the future leaders of the world. Well, that's because in global governance, who's going to run the countries? Well, people that are running the metropolitan areas. Yes. That they want no government above the international government and their nodes, their public-private partnership. And people have to know, public is not us. Public are the people that they put in place to control us. So the public-private partnership is based on regional governments run by mayors. Well, and that's where we are.
Mayors and NGOs. Cheating. Right. Mel? Mayors and NGOs. I've said for a long time that what they're building is loyalty networks. Right?
Yes.
So whatever group it is that feels like it's disenfranchised, maybe it's trans people or whatever it is, they're pouring money into them, creating these loyalty networks that act not as a police force, but like brown shirts. They're enforcers, and they have the violent enforcers of Antifa, the ones who are trained that they can call on. They have the cartels and the terrorist organizations who are their army. And so, and what they intend to use, though, is these loyalty networks to make sure that everybody says the right thing and does the right thing. In other words, nobody disagrees, right? We all sing from the same hymn sheet. We all follow the orders and so on. And then they call on the brown shirts. and they just bring in these violent agitators or these all these hapless, idiots who they have recruited through their programming and their ideology and their brainwashing, and they use them to do their dirty work. But nobody has any real power because all of it is submits to that global government, those global institutions, the World Health Organization that sets policy, the Bank of International Settlements that controls the money supply, right? Not to mention that, will we even have money in the future because it's going to be based on social credits, just like they
Right.
do in China, which is what they praise at the World Economic Forum and so on. Look how well China's doing. It sounds great. And people loved, they love to call these things conspiracies. But these things are out in the open now for everybody to see. And I just, so one of the things that you do in your book, which I think is so helpful, is that when you start to have this conversation, it has various stages, right? How we got to this moment, this globalist movement, this Islamist, what you call the red, green, blue axis that I know, you've heard me talk about that too. The red being the Marxist, the leftist side of it, the green being the political Islamist side of it, right? And the blue being the globalist side of it. So this axis has been in effect for a very, very, very long time. The leftists have been running cover for the Islamists and creating the white nationalist threat and
Right.
and creating and running and funding both sides, as we've seen with the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is just the tip of the iceberg, operating,
Yes.
no doubt, for the intelligence agencies, creating this, and so they can control both sides of the narrative. Then they create the problem so they can be the solution, which is literally a page out of Joseph Goebbels' book. But you can go, you can keep going back into biblical times, and you can look
Yes.
at bloodlines, and then you can go, there's various stages. But what your book does is look at this particular period that is right after the Second World War, which you point out in your introduction is rooted in the establishment of the Bank of International Settlements in the wake of World War One, right? And I think a lot of people that have woken up to parts of this and are asking more questions today than they ever have. But what you really are dealing with is institutions that we have been told were set up to protect us. They were set up for good reasons, right? So the Bank of International Settlements was going to help the world recover after the First World War. But in the end, what did the Bank of International Settlements end up being and doing, and what has it become, Mel?
Okay, well, yes, it was established because after the First World War, they wanted a bank that was neutral. Okay, and we've been told our whole lives that Switzerland is neutral. Of course, it's in Bern, Switzerland. And here's the thing that people have to know about the Bank of International Settlements. First of all, it was supposed to end Bretton Woods. They wanted to end the Bank of International Settlements, but that was ignored. That's the first thing. The second thing is that the Bank of International Settlements remained supposedly neutral, but what they were really doing that entire time, 60 million people were victims of the Nazis in World War II. They were taking money and transferring money. And it was actually business as usual, whether the money was coming from the gold from Czechoslovakia stolen or from the concentration camps or from one of the
They
main
were acting
people.
as the bank for the Nazis
Yes,
throughout the entire
one of the
war.
main people was Schreff. He was the head of the Reich Bank. He was Hitler's banker.